Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight in-game as well. These videos are based on your suggestions, which you leave for me down in the comment section below, and then they're voted on by my patrons over on Patreon who get to pick which monsters I do in what order. Now this month, an overwhelming majority of my patrons have voted to see some of my homebrew monsters, so I thought we could kick off October with a fun one that I call the Trassiorf. And for any of you who want to use this creature in your game, you can find the stats that I've created if you visit my website under the Homebrew tab, and you can do that totally for free. You don't have to be a patron or anything like that, and I'll make sure to leave a link to that in the description box below. Now, one thing I need to make a note of while I talk about this creature is that I'm a little bit under the weather right now, which is probably why my voice sounds a tiny bit strange. I've just come back from my honeymoon and unfortunately was sat next to someone who was very, very sick on my flight home. So I've been getting over a cold, so apologies if I'm a little bit more nasal than usual today. Hopefully it'll be gone by next week. But anyway, I should get started. So there'll be a little reference image in the top left-hand corner of this video today, and that serves as the inspiration for the Trassiorf, the inspiration for this creature. Basically, I was browsing the Tripping Through Time subreddit, something I definitely recommend, people basically finding modern humour in medieval and period pieces of art. And this was a while back, but someone posted this fantastically weird piece of medieval art, which, as I say, you should be able to see in the top left corner. And it reminded me of this video that I'd watched on the Vox YouTube channel called Why Knights Fought Snails in Medieval Art. If you're not familiar with Vox, you may have also seen a similar video by Scalagrim, and a few other really great historical channels are worth taking a look into. I'll leave links to them in the description box below as well. But basically, medieval art is unbelievably weird and full of mythical creatures, as I'm sure you know, but not simply the mythological ones or the ones that arose from misinformed sources or half-remembered demi-truths. Medieval art is basically full of memes, I guess? Parodies, metaphors, in-jokes, whose meanings have long since been lost or forgotten through the ages. A historian named Lillian M. Randall examined some of these in-jokes in the 1960s and concluded that, for example, the giant snails represented a family of European moneylenders known as the Lombards. The Lombards were a family who occupied the Italian peninsula in the late 700s AD. But after they suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Charles the Great, better known as Charlemagne, the king of what is basically now France, heavy sanctions and scorn were imposed on the Lombard family following this defeat, and by the time these manuscripts were being illustrated some 400 to 500 years later, they became a laughingstock. Possibly because of the shape of the Italian peninsula looking vaguely like a little slug with two eye stalks, or possibly because of the sanctions imposed and the power stripped from the Lombards. Basically, most of their official power was removed, but due to their wealth and influence, they retained much of their clout among the people of Europe, mostly because of their wealth. But they were ridiculed for this, and known for fleeing this battle against Charlemagne, but still retaining power like a creature that holds onto its home and its wealth, and carries it around while it flees on its back. To the medieval people, this meant only one thing, and was a representation of a snail. But as I'm wont to do, I've flown wildly off topic. Basically, I was curious to see what on earth the story or implications could be for this in-joke. What was this thing, this backwards-facing, bardic centaur thing with a smug-looking evil butt face? Surely, if giant snails get an awesome backstory, we need to have one for this crazy creature too. And I scoured the internet looking for clues, but I really wasn't sure what to be looking up. Reverse centaur doesn't really show up much. Centaurs shows up too much information that's irrelevant. Looking up weird medieval art was really entertaining, but didn't really tell me anything. So there was almost nothing that I could find out about this majestic creature. Eventually, I happened upon the Twitter page of a medieval historian and professor at Liverpool University named Sarah Peverley. I reached out to Professor Peverley, who very kindly lent me some of her hard-earned credibility, who was able to shed the following light on this creature. She told me that this image comes from Jean Froissart's Chroniques, or Chronicles, written in the 1400s, a prose history of the 100 Years' War from 1337 to 1453 between England and France, although what this particular reverse angry-butted centaur was up to during those 100 years. Sadly, she had no information. She mentioned that this particular copy of the Chronicles was illuminated, a medieval term for these particular types of illustration, by a scribe known as a limner. And these people often aimed to delight and entertain those wealthy donors who could commission manuscripts of this nature. She mentioned that the edges around the text often denote a place beyond containment, and the bizarre images illustrated in these margins are designed to reflect that chaos, which, definitely I can see that in this weird creature. She echoes an idea that I covered in my Centaur Monster Monday, where centaurs, with their dual nature of beast and man, were often prone to sin, and in this case represent a lustful nature, lust, and also hypocrisy, perhaps literally in this creature's case, being two-faced. So perhaps it was a bit of a fun way of having a bit of a cheeky message with whoever commissioned the artwork. Very fitting of a bard, Professor Peverley concluded, with the fact that this bum face resembles a lot of medieval representations of toothy, shaggy demons who occasionally had faces in their bellies or on other weird parts of their body, so something devilish and demonic about it. And because I can't believe I'm getting this directly from a professor, I'll quote here where she says to think of this as a kind of kiss my ass statement, not that anyone would really want to, with this bizarre creature. So thank you very much, Professor Peverley. Jean Froissart, spelt Jean Froissart, was a French-speaking medieval author from the Lowlands region, a region in the neighbourhood of modern-day Belgium. He was a historian and, importantly, a poet, so perhaps there was something autobiographical about this strange, butt-faced bard centaur. On that note, seeing that the centaur is in reverse, we'd usually assume that the body was facing the other way, I guess. I decided to reverse Froissart's name and call this monster a Trassiorf. So how do we translate all of that into a creature that you can use in D&D? Well, I decided, just like the centaur, to call this creature a large monstrosity. So far so good. It can gallop at 50 feet, just like centaurs. It has 12 AC and it knows Elvish and Sylvan as its languages, as well as Common. I thought, there's a bard attached to half of this creature, so I feel like this is a creature that has travelled and learned many things, told many stories, and it may know a few different languages, so it needs to be able to communicate with players. I wanted to make sure this thing had a heavy focus on the bard on its back, because all the attention is going to be drawn to that weird massive face up front. So I wanted its bardic calling to be apparent in its stats as well, and although having near identical stats to the standard centaur, I wanted to give it a higher intelligence score and a significantly increased charisma, because, it's dressed like a medieval noble, for goodness sake. So, very charismatic, despite the evil butt face. I gave it a multi-attack, like most centaurs do, so it has a 2d6 plus 4 bludgeoning attack with its hooves, but also, I thought that I would give it a 1d8 plus 4 bludgeoning attack with its loot. It's not carrying any massive weapons, but it can stride past an unsuspecting adventurer and clonk them on the head with its beautiful musical instrument. Doesn't seem like the kind of creature that's going to be carrying a massive longbow or a pike iconic to regular centaurs. But this is kind of where the similarities end. But I wasn't quite done with the attacks. Because I was feeling particularly crude, this creature is supposed to give in to its sinful and potentially demonic natures. It's supposed to be ungodly. Let's embrace that. I thought because this particular reverse centaur has a face where its butt should be, I thought it could have a breath attack that I call Breath of the Second Head, which recharges on a 5 or 6 of a d6 roll at the beginning of its round. And this particular breath attack deals 7d8 poison damage as a noxious gas escapes from this creature's butt mouth in a cone, causing creatures that fail a constitution saving throw to spend their action retching in the fog of butt gas. Yeah, I feel like I've really lowered the bar with this one, huh? Anyway, if you still want to do fun things with this reverse centaur, and you don't want to spend your turn gassing out your players, I thought that it would be only fitting that this medieval bard have some appropriate bardic spells. So I've said that this creature is a 5th level spellcaster, using its charisma to sing magic into existence, allowing it to perform things like Dissonant Whispers, Heroism, Magic Mouth, and Stinking Cloud, of course. But I'm not really telling a story with this creature, and I thought that was important. I feel like the kind of whimsical and playful nature of this medieval image inspired something about the Fae and fairies about it. And there's something, I don't know, this image just seemed like the bard on the back is not pleased about his situation. I mean, I wouldn't be either, but that kind of said to me that this creature didn't volunteer for its existence. Perhaps it smacks of a curse or Fae trickery. This is definitely not a creature that was born this way. So, my running idea on a story, a lore for these creatures goes as follows. I feel like there was once a great Fae king who played the most beautiful music in all of the land, and people travelled from all over to come and hear the Fae king's music in his forest. Now, a bunch of rowdy, lecherous and jealous travelling performers who happened one day to pass through this forest and hear this wonderful music were extremely jealous of the Fae King's natural talents and realised that they might be able to steal this power for themselves if they managed to take the Fae King's magical loot. So the next night, they rode in on horseback to chase through the crowd of admirers and mug this tiny fairy king. On the backs of their horses, they were more than enough to easily overpower him and manage to steal his magic loot. Now, true enough, as they escaped, they played the lute and realised that each of them could play as well as the Fae King, but this came at a terrible cost. They were cursed. The Fae King's magic fused them with their horses as they rode away, and made it so no matter how beautiful their music, no one would be able to understand their songs. To this end, I gave the Trassiorf an ability called Frustrating Reversal, because this is a reverse centaur after all, which means that these creatures can only say the opposite of what they mean, sort of Bizarro from DC Comics style. Best friend becomes worst enemies and so on. It's opposite day to them, and this causes them to have disadvantage on persuasion and deception checks. But I also thought that this should be how they think, it's how their understanding works. Everything they hear is in reverse as well, robbing these creatures of the tales and musical ballads that they once knew and memorized. As they try to find beauty through song, they are forever playing terrible, incomprehensible songs, as you can see from the bored and melancholic face of the Trassiorf, both in the medieval image and in my representation. And this paints everything that they say or sing with a gloomy, mournful drone that drives nearby creatures to frustration. In an ability called Distracting Drone, I've said that the Trassiorf emits a constant, terrible song that causes all creatures, allies and enemies alike, to make a wisdom saving throw. And if they fail, they're overcome with irritation at this creature constantly singing so badly, and have disadvantage to attack creatures that aren't the Trassiorf, but advantage when it comes to punishing this musical monster. So yeah, that's the gist of my idea for the Trassiorf. As I say, if you really enjoyed it, there should be a link in the description box where you can use stats, where I've made stats for this creature so you can use it in your games for a bit of fun. And I had absolutely tons of fun making this. I want to give a huge shout out to Professor Sarah Peverley for all of her help finding the origins of this creature, where this artwork came from. And I want to thank all of my patrons for giving me the opportunity to talk about some of my homebrew creations and sharing that with you. If you have a monster that you'd like to see me draw, please make sure to leave that in the comments. But if, like my patrons, you want to have more control over the kind of videos that you see from me and you want to help me make these videos, you want to support me in a very, very personal way, then I'd urge you to head over to Patreon, because all backers get the chance to vote on which monsters come next. But they also get other rewards, like copies of this illustration, for example. Some of them get private live streams where we can work on things together, or there's even a tier where we can sit down and have a one-on-one chat, and I can either illustrate something for you, or we can talk through tips and advice in person via Skype, or whatever method you fancy, and talk about world building, building a character, making a monster like this, whatever. I also wanted to note that if you're interested in seeing more drawings from me, right now it's October, and every year I take part in a challenge called Inktober, where illustrators draw every single day based on a prompt list of randomly generated words, and I'm having a huge amount of fun doing that. So if you want to see a drawing from me every single day that's done in ink while I complete this Inktober challenge, make sure to check out, well, either my Patreon page, my Instagram, my Facebook, or my Twitter, because I'm posting there every single day. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me for today's Homebrew Monster. We'll be back next week with one from the official books. But I hope you enjoyed this one too. So until next time, make sure to keep your lustful and demonic thoughts to yourself, don't steal any loots from Fey Kings, and happy monster hunting.